Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara has announced that the school is closing. I sit down with former chairman of the Board of Trustees, Mr. Jeffrey Burke, to discuss the closure and what it might mean for the students and brick and mortar schools overall. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today I'm joined by my special guest, Mr. Jeffrey Burke. Jeffrey is the former chairman of the board of Brooks Institute of Photography, and I am the most recent chairman of the board. There is no chairman now because of reasons that we will discuss on this call. But we decided it might be appropriate, especially this week, considering last week's announcement that the school will be closing, that after 70 years in operation, maybe today would be a good time for he and I to sit down and talk through not only Brooks Institute to the extent that we can. Obviously, we can't be as forthcoming as we'd like to be because there's still lots of moving parts happening. So we'll go as deep as we can without pulling, too much of the covers back. But we're going to talk about Brooks. We want to talk about the students. We want to talk about the faculty and what's happening there. We want to talk about the history of the school, and then also just overall what's going on in brick and mortar education in the United States and frankly all over the world. So Jeffrey Burke, welcome to This Week in Photo.
Frederick, good to be here with you, my friend.
Man, this is the first time that you and I have sat down face to face since when? It's been a year or something?
Oh, probably. Was it the last board meeting that I was at, or I forget? It's been a while.
Yeah, it was the last board meeting that you were at before you jumped ship and left. You resigned from the board of trustees.
I stepped off the board is how I like to put it. And and I did that, as you know, I did that very reluctantly. I was very involved with that school for a long time. I was very proud to be associated with it, and it was a very tough day that I had to send my resignation letter in, but it was just the thing I had to do.
You put a ton of blood, sweat, and tears. I want to get into that a little bit, but you were one of the chairman of the board that just went above and beyond. And just to set the frame, you're retired, right? So you were retired from the photographic industry. You call yourself a recovering photographer. You now devote a lot of your time to art, and you know your way around the business, and you've been connected. So the Brooks project, as chairman of the board, was kind of a side project for you, right?
Well, it was. It was something that, as you say, I did put an awful lot of time and effort into. I believed in that school. And over the years, I had come to know just an awful lot of people who went to school there, who taught there. In 1995, when we still had our photo studio operating, we were a good-sized studio, commercial advertising studio. And we started an internship program with a Brooks student. And over the next 10 years, we had about 200 different interns come through, about 100 of which were from Brooks, the other half being from various schools all over the country. It was a very robust program. And the Brooks kids were always on the ball. They knew what they were doing. They were technically proficient. They had a good attitude for the most part. And it was that internship program that we had at our studio that really brought me into working with Brooks, first on their the advisory board for the photo program, pro photo program, and then eventually onto the board when they formed a new board of trustees for accreditation purposes. So I was involved with that school for an awfully long time, and I have a lot of friends there still. And the closing of the school, it comes hard to all of us.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And as current chairman of the board, we worked really hard to try to figure out what to do. What's the right move to make everyone involved happy, and ultimately, obviously, as we know, it led to where the announcement that happened this past Friday that the school was closing. And like you hit it right on the head. The whole idea, the Brooks name, I always thought about Brooks as the Harvard or Princeton or Stanford of photography, right? I mean, I have to tell you honestly, there was always this subtle rivalry between Brooks on the one hand and Art Center in Pasadena on the other.
And it was always a very friendly rivalry. Bill Robbins, who's the chair of the pro photo department, is an art center grad, and people love to give him no end of grief about that one. They do. Art center was a more pricey school, but Brooks was a highly respected school. And in fact, if you go out into the professional photography community now, if you go to the trade associations, they are populated very heavily with Brooks grads.
Mm-hmm.
That school has a great reputation for turning out proficient working photographers for years. I mean, ever since the end of World War II.
Yeah. What do you think with the alum? And this is my first time being involved with a school closure. What does this do to the Brooks brand for the people that hold Brooks degrees right now? Does it make it stronger because now you're part of a lineage that they're not making any more of, or does it make it weaker?
Collectible? Is
you're
that what
collectible
it is?
now. Yeah, your value has increased.
I don't know. I have to say, on the one hand, and we can get into it, but I think a big part of the reason that photography education in general has declined or suffered in some way is because of the fact that you really don't need a bachelor's degree to practice professional photography. You don't, right? Mm-hmm. So to the extent that, anybody is going to be hurt because their school closed, for the most part, most of your clients never ask you, oh, do you have a degree in photography? May I see it? That just doesn't ever happen. So
yeah, it's more, let me see your portfolio, right? Let me see what you can do today.
It's not about your pedigree. It's about your book. It's all about your book. What have you got? So I don't know. The closing of Brooks is really, I think, internally hurtful to a lot of people who took pride in the school, all the graduates that went there, and the faculty and staff that are still there now. I mean, my heart goes out to them, but most especially the current students. Yeah. Those poor kids, I have to tell you, they should be treated better. Okay, let me say that at the outset. They should have gotten more notice. Closing the school 3 weeks before, just announcing a sudden closure 3 weeks before the start of the new semester, that's ridiculous. That's unheard of, and it's in my opinion, it's completely irresponsible.
Yeah. So. Well, let's dive into that again. And again, I preface this with, we have to be sensitive because this is kind of an ongoing issue. They just announced the fact that the school was closing, or the parent company announced that they were closing the school, or the lawyer from the parent company announced that they were closing the school Friday to the student body and faculty. And as we record this, it's Monday. So the wound is still open. And I would say
it's still in play. Everything is moving very quickly.
Yeah. So this is in many ways breaking news as we record this. And I'm lucky to have the opportunity to sit down with someone like you to kind of, and the whole impetus of this interview was people want to know. I mean, I've been inundated with interested and disinterested people asking questions, everything from what happened to what now. And obviously there are the circling vultures that are like, hey, can we get those students over? So all that stuff has been coming in. But I don't know, Jeff, what do you think? If you put yourself in the position of a student, so one of the Brooks students right now that are the affected students, you're watching this video right now and you're thinking, okay, what do I do now? What would you tell them? What's the advice you give them? Again,
as you say, without getting too involved in details, because it is a kind of there are a lot of moving pieces right now.
Yeah.
I know that I have already heard about a couple of attempts to try to place the students somewhere where, especially, the kids that were close to graduating, for God's sakes, I really want to see them land on their feet somehow. So I know that there are at least two different efforts that I've heard about of trying to place the students somewhere that's appropriate, that has a good program. And so, you certainly want to see that.
Yeah. And the same thing, I've done some grassroots reaching out to industry professionals to kind of pull together a digital care package, for the students, this is something. I just feel so bad. It's like I don't know what I would have done if this had happened to me, as I've been working so hard, and you have your identity in many ways is tied to the school. You're like, hey, I'm a Brooks student. And then boom, you're not a Brooks student anymore. And your future is kind of up in the air. So,
but I have to tell you, and we can get more into this, but this didn't come as a surprise to anyone. I don't think. I think that the sudden manner in which the closure got announced and the quick closing of the school, that was surprising, certainly. But let's face it, we were on the board, and I think everybody at the school, involved with the school, even the students, knew that the school had been in trouble for a while, and for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of finger pointing that could be done about this or that or other specific things, but I think more broadly, it's probably a matter of changing educational, changing business, changing industry norms. As I said, you don't necessarily have to have a degree to be a photographer. And these days, with the technology being so good as it is, most anybody can take a well-exposed picture, or they can push the button and the camera will take a well-exposed picture, right? So it really comes down to, composition and lighting, right? And having something interesting to say from your heart. So I don't think that anybody saw this as a big surprise. And I think if you were a student there, you had heard rumblings, people had heard things. And the fact that the school over the past few years has been bounced around. They got really priced out of Santa Barbara, where the school was founded and where they had been for so many years. Santa Barbara real estate is just through the roof these days. So the move down to Ventura, was 10 years ago now, to open the first big campus down there, was the first indication of things changing. And then just recently, they were moving out of the big movie studio building there and moving into downtown. But so no one was completely surprised. But I think, as I say, the suddenness of it is a shock.
Yeah, it is a shock. So jump into your time machine. Right, one of those cool art pieces that you put together. So
kind of retro, kind of streamlined, yeah.
Yeah, you're in an H.G. Wells time machine, and you go back to the point of inflection where Brooks should have done this versus that. Where would you say that is? Is it around the time when lynda.com was? Because I kind of feel like Brooks, being a 70-year-old institution, should have been Lynda. In a lot of ways, it should have, and we're armchair quarterbacking, obviously, with the time machine.
Sure.
But if Brooks had shifted and kind of gone in the direction of digital when Lynda was just getting steam and Kelby Training and Creative Live and et cetera, if Brooks had at least jumped into that arena, I think using the Brooks brand and its alumni network, it could have ddone some things. Do you think so or no?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of that. So bringing education online. Sure. Now, as being part of the board, we were very much in favor of doing something like that. Mm-hmm. The faculty was a little bit hesitant. And let's be honest, most of the faculty that are there have been there for a while, and they're very used to doing things in a certain way. But I think there was a certain amount of acceptance on the part of everybody there that bringing the Brooks education online was an important thing to do. And there were lots of different opportunities and prospects and things that we had talked about. So, yeah, certainly that's part of it. I think if you're going to talk about the history of the school, not old ancient history, but certainly from the time that I became involved, the school was owned by the Brooks family until I guess it was 99 or 2000. I gave a commencement address in December of 1999. Just as Ernie Brooks Jr. was stepping away from the school, they had sold it to CEC, Career Education Corp. In Chicago. That was a major turning point for the school, both for good and for bad, as you know. On the one hand, it was a major influx of capital. They got all new computers, which were still pretty new at the time, back in 2000. That was still part of the photo digital revolution back then. In fact, it was early in doing it. The prospects were looking good for a while. In the next few years, the student population swelled enormously to 2,500 students, which was way more than they were prepared to handle. Unfortunately, as you know, and as is pretty public now, in 2005, they were smacked with a class action lawsuit by the state of California, which was very difficult for the school. And it was from 2005 till today that enrollment began to decline and continued to decline. And, for all that the CEC, the corporate masters, did to try to help the school out, they also put tremendous pressure on the admissions people to bring in bodies, Mm-hmm. Now, I wouldn't want to go on the air saying that CEC is guilty or culpable of this or that or the other, but there was a class action lawsuit that was settled.
Yeah.
And that stayed with the school for a while. That did. And I
So
believe
was that you think that was the point of inflection, or that was that just
that was certainly the beginning of the decline.
Yeah, it was one of the punches, right?
It was a big punch. Having a class action lawsuit thrown against your school really kept a lot of people from made them hesitant about enrolling there.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Another, years and years ago, way before I was involved, I know that Brooks had given up WASC, Western Association of Schools and Colleges, WASC, which is the good regional accreditation that most schools have. And because they didn't want to be involved with all the nonsense that went along with it. And they instead took national accreditation, which you would think national accreditation would be the better, but it's not. And in fact, ACICS, their national accreditor, has very recently been in the news themselves. In fact, I believe they're about to be shut down, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So, and Brooks was ACICS accredited. So, that really didn't help them very much either.
Yeah. Yeah. So a series of unfortunate events that led to, I would say, in many ways, not a very timely or well-conceived shutdown of the school.
Not at all. Not at all. Oh my! In a real world scenario, what should happen is there should be an announcement that the school will eventually be closing, and they would perform what's called a teach out. Right.
Right.
So most schools, what would happen is they would announce the school is closing. They would stop accepting new students. They would stop their marketing. They would close their admissions, but they would continue to teach all of the students who are at the school at the location that they're at until the last student is graduated or has left. That's the way it's supposed to work. Had CEC, the corporate owners of the school up until last year, if they had still had the school, they would have done that, because they have done that with a number of their other schools. Another major inflection point, since you're asking about that, of course, would be the United States Congress enacting new regulations specifically about for-profit schools that put just a lot of difficult restrictions on them, basically trying to force them out of business. Now I am not a superhero or a super fan, I should say, of for-profit education. And CEC, the former parent company of Brooks, you could argue that there were an awful lot of missteps and a lot of neglect, that though they did put some money into the school, it didn't necessarily work out to the betterment of the school or the students, right? But they saw the writing on the wall. They knew that when the new what's called gainful employment regulations came into effect this year, that there was a very good chance that Brooks would lose all its federal Title IV funding.
Yeah.
And that was the reason that they offloaded the school as quickly as they did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, in related news, what is it in Washington? So Washington Artworks and the Washington School of Photography, founded in 1976, announced that it would be filing for bankruptcy and closing their doors immediately, also leaving many students and artists with financial losses and nowhere to go. So this is another one, right? So, so let's just go on a different tangent here. What does this mean for brick and mortar education? Do these two major institutions in the photography industry shutting down mean that brick and mortar schools are just no longer viable in today's kind of, zeitgeist of how people want to learn, because it's all YouTube, like what we're on now? Right. Or is it just financial mismanagement? What is it?
Well, okay, so the next inflection point, or another very important aspect of this whole conversation, is the rising cost of education, right? And when you combine dramatically rising college costs along with the effects of the 2008 recession, and you get to a situation where you realize kids have to spend, in the case of Brooks, $81,000 or $100,000 to go to school and come out to a very uncertain job market. Well, it kind of begs the question of whether or not it's worth it, right? Whether or not paying for the school and spending the time, whether or not it's gonna pay for itself by the time that you graduate. Now, I happen to think there are a lot of reasons for going to college generally, not just technical training or photography training, but just in general. Going to college it makes your brain work. It helps your brain muscle learn new things and think reasonably and comparatively about how the world works. And you meet people who are also like that are learning about the world and insightful and thoughtful and inquisitive. So I think there's a lot of value to going to college. I have a daughter who is just about to graduate from Otis here in LA.
Yeah. A lot of value to that human to human interpersonal
Absolutely.
social dynamic that is school, right?
That is it. But beyond that, I have to tell you, technical training that is really expensive, that gives you a degree that, as we said, you don't necessarily need. You can see why the fortunes of the school started plummeting. And I think that for the kind of work that we do, right, for working photographers, or these days, working visual artists of all sorts that just use photography as one of many tools. Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of different ways to learn that now. Not the least of which, of course, is lynda.com and all of the other online programs that you mentioned. So I think that's part of it.
Is it time for something new, Jeff? I mean, is it time for something hybrid that speaks to that community sort of atoms to atoms interaction and social dynamics of the physical with a digital component as well? We haven't seen that yet. I mean, we see kind of the different smatterings of that, but nothing like that.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I think there is a lot of value with, hands-on instruction and a human body right there that can tell you how to do something and show you with his or her hands how it's done, mm-hmm. and then answer your question immediately. I mean, you just don't get that in an online scenario, really, mostly.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think there's still a value of that. Is there, reason to move into a hybrid scenario? Well, we had been talking about that for a while, a hybrid program that has a very large online component with occasional, pilgrimage to the mothership.
Yeah.
Right, where you could go in. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because people like to learn from people. They do. And I think you learn probably more effectively by having somebody talk to you and show you how to do things. So sure, things are changing. And I think if you can meld together technology and human relationships, that's probably the best of all worlds. I don't know that anybody's really doing that well or effectively yet.
Yeah. The gauntlet is thrown down. Yeah, because it's like, I mean, most kids today and most people are consuming most of their media on these things, right?
Yep,
so that's where you learn from. So if you can hit them there, and then also have, like you said, I 100% agree with you, like having that in-person, hey, teach, I got a question. I really can't grok. I've read this paragraph 30 times and I don't understand why f-stops, why smaller numbers mean larger. Right, I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me? Sometimes you need a person to talk you through that, and you can't get it. Yeah,
sure. You frequently need that. In fact, I'm sort of struggling with trying to learn After Effects right now.
Cool.
Take my Photoshop stuff that I'm doing and marry it to a timeline and make it work. But there are times when you just can't get the one damn widget or button to work right. And somebody who knows how to do it, I would love to just look over my shoulder and say, "Hey, teach, how do I do this?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's certainly an opportunity for that. And, Brooks was brimming with different sorts of opportunities for not only school at the Ventura campus, but there were requests from all over the world, from New Zealand and from, things in different areas that they wanted to have Brooks branded instructors come and speak to their students and establish a brick and mortar institution for exactly that reason, so that you could get that human interaction, So
yeah. Well, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about the faculty at Brooks, right? So lots of amazing photographers down there. I mean, they just the talent pool down there is ridiculous. So those people have forgotten more than I probably will ever know about photography, and now they're in a predicament as well, which is suddenly kind of weirdly thrust upon them. I put it I draw the analogy of Silicon Valley, like once a quarter in Silicon Valley, depending on how the numbers are, corporations shed people,
There's a flush.
Yep. There's a flush, especially around the end of the year. So people in Silicon Valley are not strangers to layoffs or being thrust back into the job seeker pool. However, in education,
right,
there tends
That's
to be
different.
It's different. There you
It's
tend
different.
to
Absolutely.
like burrow in and be there for long periods of time, which makes looking for a job kind of a foreign experience. How should they proceed? Like, what advice would you give to those folks that are watching this?
Oh, there's nothing that I can say to them. I'll be honest. They, all of the faculty there were aware of the situation of the school. And I'm sure that they have all had plenty of opportunities to sit quietly and think about what the next move might be when the day came.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know that they were expecting it to come quite so suddenly, but, here we are. These people that are there teaching, great men and women that for the most part have been there for a while, they know how to teach photography, but finding another place to do that is similar to Brooks, good luck on that. I don't know where you do that. I really don't know. And I wish the best for them, and I hope that they all do well, because as you say, these are tremendously talented people who have been in the business a long time, and they know how things work, so they do have value. The question is, where do you put that value to work?
Yeah, and is it a question of, hey, I'm on the Titanic and now I'm on a life raft. I want to go get on the Queen Mary over there,
Well,
or do you get on land and go find something else?
Analogy. I mean, I think that there's probably opportunity for the instructors there to be able to participate in some of the online education that's going on.
Absolutely.
For them to be able to, I know a number of them have been involved with national trade associations, and I hope they would continue to be. And, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people with their experience and their knowledge of the industry. But certainly I'm not the one to tell them how to do it. I wish them all luck. I do. I hope they all do well and land on their feet.
Yeah, well, I think we're both in agreement that this whole situation is unfortunate, and it's someone drew the analogy of just sort of like a slow motion crash that you are watching, but you can't do anything about it. You're like, no, turn left, and you can't. There's nothing that you can do because of all these forces that you mentioned. Everything from the class action lawsuit to which triggered the declining in enrollment, to industry forces, to the constant barrage of online competition taking away mind share, to the fact that you don't need to hold up a degree to go get a job. You hold up a book. And if your book is better than the guy that has a degree, who's going to get the job, right?
Well, although let me take a little exception to what you said about the slow motion crash where you can't do anything. So as you know, a couple of years ago, while I was still on the board, you were there, we knew that the school was in a perilous situation. And a number of us, myself, you included, other people, we were involved with trying to buy the school away from CEC and turn it into a not-for-profit institution, because we knew that the gainful employment regulations were going to be coming down. CEC, the parent company, knew this. They wanted us to take the school. I flew to Chicago. I talked with them about this at their invitation. And as you know, I spent a number of months trying to rally a group to take the school nonprofit and give it a future. Unfortunately, the parent corporation, we were asking, along with our attorney, we were asking an awful lot for them. We were really trying to get them to help us take the school not for profit. And, eventually what they said to me was, we are not in the business of helping our products become not for profit so we can spin them off. That's not what our shareholders are empowering us to do. And, I get that. I do get that. They knew that it was going to cost a lot of money to do a teach out at that school. And we knew how much it was going to cost, or how much we thought it would cost to do a teach out at the school. So we were holding out for the deal that would have made it work. Give us the school, keep some of the liabilities, give us some cash. And in the end, they weren't willing to go where we needed to go. And instead, they found the current owners who apparently were kind of unaware of what they were getting into, and here we are today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's clear because you don't spend that kind of money for a school and then close it later. And then, we don't want to go too deep inside. There were some missteps in terms of management shuffles and all that stuff that happened that could have contributed to a lot of this as well, right?
Well, that's very true. And, unfortunately, as you know, the board of trustees at this school was not a completely in charge board. I mean, realistically, we were an advise and consent board on certainly everything academic and a lot of the operational stuff. But in the end, the school was owned by a for-profit corporation who maintained their ownership, and they get to call the final shots on the big stuff in the end, no matter how much we would squeal and yelp at them.
Yeah.
They're the bosses. They're the masters. So
yeah.
We did the best we could.
Some people in Silicon Valley use the term for people that ask for your advice and don't take it. You know what we call them? We call them askholes. When you continually ask for advice and never take the advice, it gives you the opportunity to say, well, I asked the opinion of my board. Yeah, exactly.
And they do ask, and then they smile and do whatever the hell they want,
and do something else completely different. Yeah. And, which is frustrating. I know it's frustrating for you, which, part of that has contributed to your resignation from the board. And part of that contributed to ultimately, as has been publicly noted, the entire board resigning last week. A week ago yesterday, as we record this, the board of trustees resigned, and then that following Friday, the owners made the decision to shutter the school. And I think it was that Monday. Was it that Monday? No, it was that Tuesday, a week ago, that they terminated the president, Eddie Clift, from the school. So,
and by the way, let's point out, although I am not there and you were, and you were the chair at the time, it's my understanding that the board, who was supposed to have the authority to remove the president, was not the entity that removed the president. But
no, we were not.
I guess we don't want to get too
the
into
entity.
That. No.
Thank you for highlighting that. We were not the entity that terminated him. In fact, I don't want to go into it, but we did not do it. In fact, we wanted to vote on some things that we never even got to vote on because he had been terminated that morning. So. Yeah. It's like a reality show, man. Seriously, it's like a reality.
I tell you, it was always interesting. It was never a dull moment being involved with that school. It wasn't. And there were so many different initiatives and projects and things going on, just academically and creatively. There were a lot of things going on at the school that made it a real pleasure to be there. I have to say, going and seeing the new student work every semester or so, and being involved with the different projects and the travel projects that they did and all that it was entertaining and fun, and it was a sort of a great place to be. I always liked being there. I did.
Well, let's close this off. So what's next for Brooks right now? From you, I know you're sort of outside looking in from the stands, but what do you think is next for Brooks?
Well, as I say, I have spoken in the last couple of days. Everybody likes to chit chat and gossip as soon as things like this hit the fan, and so I've received a number of texts and calls from friends and other people there, and I know the thing that everyone is most concerned about right now are the students, right? Especially the ones that were close to graduation. So, as I say, I think there are some efforts underway to try to place the students in the best possible scenario, and help them, as I said, land on their feet. So that's the most important thing right now. Beyond that, I'm sure it's going to be a messy quagmire of finger pointing and lawsuits. And I have to say, I'm kind of glad that I'm not involved with that. But it's the real shame. There's also been some talk that I've heard about somehow reviving the school or pulling it out of the ashes. And, God bless the people that are thinking like that. It's a wonderful, noble thought. Whether or not that's going to ever really happen, Frederick, I couldn't say.
Yeah, if some angel swooped down like a Mark Cuban or So, who knows? Someone that says, "Hey, here's $1 billion. Make that thing work."
Sure.
You know, it could.
For about $4 million, I think we could make it work. So, just throwing that out there. Any of your audience
$4 million
has $4 million kicking around, would like to do a startup with a whole new, with some experienced faculty and a whole new model, give us a call. I'm sure there's somebody who would be interested in working on that. You know.
Hey, LinkedIn, are you listening? Yeah.
You mean Microsoft, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Linked
right.
Micro Linda, whatever.
Linda, Mike, yeah.
Micro Linda Soft, yeah. All right, well, Jeff, what's going on with you, man? I don't want to leave this interview without diving into the stuff that you're working on. You make some crazy, awesome sort of what the heck is going on inside of this man's brain type sculptures. Tell me about that.
I see you got my latest images.
Yes.
Well, you know,
I'm sending you some help over there, by the way.
Well, as you know, I was an advertising photographer. I was a product photographer. Specifically, I was a food photographer for 20 years. And that's what I know how to do. And I did food photos for years and years and years. And eventually we segued our business into being a stock photo agency, and we sold that a bunch of years ago, and which gave me the opportunity to become more involved with things like Brooks. But it also gave me the opportunity to become an artist. And since I can't draw or paint, then photography is the thing, and Photoshop. Those are the things that I know how to do. So I've been working on this series of images now since 2009. The series is actually called Beautiful Again, and I collect old costume jewelry at flea markets and swap meets and things, and I bring them back to my studio, and I have a little jewelry lighting set up, and I shoot each piece individually and put them in a Lightroom database. I've got about 4,000 pictures of jewelry now, along with big shoe boxes full of jewelry. Wow. And in Photoshop, then I composite those into being these wild and wacky, what I call scenes of utopian bliss. So I am enabled by my professional advertising photography experience, but I am mostly inspired by 12 years of Catholic school, which makes me a recovering Catholic. So. Wow. There you are. I put that all together, and my series is really based on the idea of mythology and the myth of paradise, as I call it. And I've been doing a number of different projects that are all sort of centered around that. This year has been exceptionally busy. I've done 2 art fairs. I had a major installation at the Palm Springs Art Fair, where I installed a big 18-foot tall installation called Fabulosus Fabularis, which I thought was a fabulous name.
That is kind of fabulous.
It was what I called an homage to inventive mythology. I made it all up, but it's kind of cool. I made up little fake languages to go with it.
Mm-hmm. Is your art like what's the gist of it? Is it poking fun at religion? Is it kind of on the side of religion in terms of mythology, or like what's the gist? What nerve are you trying to push? I
try not to say poking fun, though. You could certainly see that or say that about it. It's really sort of the human need to believe that we have a place in the universe, and we are important, and we will live again. And there's just a need for that. There's an inherent human need to feel like you will live beyond your body, right? Now, I don't know if that's true. Nobody really knows if that's true,
Yeah.
But certainly we have a need. And if you look at, the religions of the world and cultural instincts and things that just happen throughout history, throughout mankind, we have this need to do this. And so I use jewelry because jewelry is a man-made expression of beauty.
Yeah.
Where religion, or more specifically paradise, is the ultimate man-made expression of beauty. So I use the one to build the other, and that's what I've been doing. So it's kind of cool. I only occasionally piss somebody off, but for the most part, it's kind of fun, unique imagery, and I'll tell you this, it's not like anything that anyone else is doing. It's a pretty unique, stylistically, formal elements of it. It's a pretty unique style of work that I've created here.
It is. It's beautiful. And these, like you said, these are not pocketable works of art, right? These are giant room-sized type installations that you spend time putting together when you assemble them on site, right?
Oh, I do. I mean, I have some wall art that, I certainly sell, and I have a couple of galleries where I sell them through. But for the most part, the installations that I do, they're either big, tall, towering pieces, or I just had just last month, I had a show at my gallery in LA, 825, where I wallpapered an entire room, floor to ceiling, all the way around. And it was, just a small thing, the history of mankind and beyond. And
no, just that thing. Yeah.
Just that thing. Last year at the LA Art Show at the Convention Center, I put together a very large installation that was called the Paradise Circus. And it was a combination, it was a big structure that was a combination of a cathedral steeple, a confessional booth, and a circus tent, all in one. So on the outside and the inside, I had religious themed circus acts. And when you went inside, being the Catholic boy that I was and know how to do, you kneel down, you pull on the rope that opens the slider, and you get a quick glimpse of paradise, which was actually, it was my version of the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch done with costume jewelry. Wow. And it was kind of fun. We had people lined up. I think about 3,000 people went through that over the course of 3 days. It was a really fun project to work on.
It sounds like a lot of it reminds me of like a Cirque du Soleil meets H.R. Geiger, or that kind
but happier,
but happier,
happier.
With brighter colors than H.R. did.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
That's cool. Where can people go to look at some of this stuff and check it out?
Well, certainly my website, jtburke.com. I have a Facebook account that I post a lot of stuff to, and I'm trying to do. I don't really do Snapchat. I post stuff on Instagram occasionally, trying to prove to my kids that I'm not really an old guy, even though I kind of am.
That's diminishing returns on that battle, man. I'm telling you.
I know. Tell me about it. Well, I just had my birthday, so I'm officially now pushing 60. I'm 59 now. So.
Oh, congratulations!
Doing pretty
Happy
well
birthday.
for a 59-year-old guy who's posting to social media. For God's sakes!
Look at that. Yeah. As long as you can remember where the buttons are, you're good. Right?
What?
What'd you say? Get off my lawn. Let me Snapchat that.
So that's what I've been doing. And I do a lot of that. I have to say, I never consider myself retired. Not at all.
Yeah.
I am a working guy. I mean, I'm a working artist, and I spend a lot of hours every week either behind my computer, putting things together, occasionally shooting the jewelry stuff. And I also have other things that I work on too. I'm building a building and doing some stuff like that. But for the most part, I
love how you just roll through that. Yeah, I have some other stuff I'm working on. Yeah, I'm building a building and,
it's a
changing
small
the
building.
world.
It's not a big building. It's
lobbying Congress and, some little small things.
No, I tell you, I say this a lot. If I had it to do over again, I might have been a property developer or something. I love building stuff. I really love building stuff. I love the smell of cut wood. I like walking through job sites and trying to guess what rooms are going to be where. And I like making things, whether it's photographs, whether it's buildings, and I am a pretty decent cook, as you happen to know.
I do, yeah. You can get down in the kitchen, man.
I love to cook.
For large groups, yeah.
I know. So I like to make stuff. I mean, in the end, that's really the thing that I do. I make stuff. I use my hands.
I was going to, you got to give credit where credit's due. It doesn't help that you're married to someone that has culinary skills as well, right?
That's right. My wife, Lorraine, was a trained chef from Culinary Institute in New York, and that's how I met her, working in a restaurant when I was just finishing up at UCLA. And that's why we started the food photography business. Originally, I wanted to be a fashion photographer, fashion and celebrity. I lived in LA. Come on, work with me, baby, that kind of. And so my wife, God bless her, she spent 2 years with me going along with my crazy ideas. And when we got married in 1985, we went to Milan. We spent 3 weeks on a working honeymoon shooting. And I took my book around to all the different magazines. And, I would get the same sort of response. They'd look at my pictures and they say, we call this in this country the catalog of photography. And I was like, all right, thank you so much. And I realized as soon as we got back from the honeymoon, I am never going to make a living in this business. I'm not. And then I sort of put two and two together. Wait, she does food. I do photography, food, photography. And that we did well with that. Yeah. We did well with that for 20 years. So,
That's cool.
I got kind of lucky, and lucky that I met her, and lucky that I figured it out in time before I went broke. So
Yeah, yeah, and not to dive too deep into this, but you sold a company that was in the stock photography sort of genre back before the whole decline of that industry, or let's not say decline as if it's over, but the morphing of that industry into what it is today, right?
It changed very specifically. So we started with food pics as a sideline business to our photography studio business, and that was at the time when there weren't very, very many specialty stock photo agencies. And so, I remember I went to Image Bank and I tried to get them to take my pictures, and they said, "Oh, food, who wants food pictures? I mean, why, right. Whatever." And so then we thought, all right, well, this isn't going to work out. Let's start our own business. So we came up with the name Food Pics, and we had 900 pictures that we had put together over 10 years that we thought were great. And the first call we got after we sent out our little mailers, somebody called and said, "I have an easy request. I just need a glass of water." I had no water, right? How about a nice beer with a foamy head? I've got all kinds of great beers, Yeah. And so we expanded it out from there, and then it got big. And I have to say, when we started it, it was, again, a very different world than when we left the business. We were still doing rights managed licensing, and our average license fee was somewhere around $500 for every one of our food pictures, back in the day. And then that's when royalty free was still a really bad word. And I don't know if it still is. It may still be, but there was, if there's such a thing now as traditional royalty free.
I don't know. I think the word of the day is micro stock, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah. See,
I'll give you a couple bucks
that.
And I'll buy a beautiful image, or, and not have to worry about anything.
There are great pictures that you can get for 10 or 20 bucks. I honestly, I don't know the business so much anymore. I mean, I got real involved with the stock photo industry, and I was on the board of PACA, the National Trade Association, and for a short while I even served as the president. And it was a really different looking industry then than it is now. And so I don't really know how people are still making a living doing it. And I think there are fewer of them. And the ones that are doing well are larger, right? You have to have at least 1 million pictures now to be able to have a library, right? So,
I think
the world's changing.
I think with this, I was going to say, I think with this conversation, I think the one thing that we can count on, whether it be the stock photo industry or brick and mortar education or anything, is change. Right? It's change. Change is the constant that drives everything, and the people that are able to embrace that change and ride the wave rather than being encompassed by it and drowned by it are the ones that are going to survive, whether it be the faculty at Brooks, the owners of Brooks, the students at Brooks. Change is inevitable, and it's how we address and how we deal with those changes going forward that defines us, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, we are very fortunate to live in very dynamic times. I mean, within our lifetimes, we've seen the rise of personal computers and the internet. I mean, my God, that's huge. That's something else. And, relating it to school, I think it's a pretty common phrase these days that getting out of school today, the job you get is the job you make, right? I mean, You can go out and you can try to find a job somewhere, a traditional job with, gives you 2 weeks vacation and health insurance and a 401k, but good luck on that one. I have to say, my son recently graduated from college about a year or so ago, and he's a video game programmer. He's doing very well. He's making a decent living. He got work instantly, getting a bunch. By the way, he graduated from a for-profit college in Santa Monica. But he's doing video game programming, but it's all gig-based work. He has not yet been an employee. He's never gotten an employee paycheck. They're all gigs. He's had 3 different jobs he's been working on over the past year and a half or so. And as I say, he's doing well, but it's just a different world. It's just a different way of working. And, it's one thing to have technical skills, but the other thing you have to have is you have to be quick on your feet and aggressive and looking for work, or you just don't make a living these days. Right? Yeah,
you're independent. It's the age of the 1099. You are your own person. You're looking out for your own health care, your health insurance, all that stuff. And, I don't know, there's different worlds, right? So there's the world of the 1099 independent contractor, and then there's the world of the salaried employee. Each has its own pluses and minuses. Like we said, the salaried employee, that guillotine is swinging once a quarter, right? And you don't know if it's going to chop your head off or your buddies or whatever. So you constantly live with that fear, depending on the organization. But then on the independent contractor side, there's that fear of when's the next gig coming, and I'm feast or famine, and all these different variables. But it's exhilarating too, because you are controlling your own sail at that point.
Well, as much as you can, sure. I mean, it's the freelance world. Back when I was a young man, this was called freelance. And I remember when we had our studio early on, we would, at the end of the shoot, we'd walk to the door, and Lorraine and I would wave goodbye to the clients, and they'd drive away. And Lorraine would look at me and say, we don't have another job booked for the rest of our lives. And that was always pretty humbling.
Those ramen noodles in the back of the cabinet? We're going to have to break those out.
Exactly. And it was hard then, and I'm sure it's hard now, but a note of encouragement to everybody who's young and in this business and working at it. It gets easier as you get older. It does. When you're first in the business and you're young, you get all the crappy jobs and the loser clients and the people that are all sure they know more than you. And you're lucky they hired you because they have a nephew that's got an SLR and they could do the same job you're doing and whatever. Over time, you get better clients with better budgets and more respect, and you feel better about your life. And so it does get better, right? But freelance is always hard. Gig economy is hard.
Yeah. But the good advice is, try it and work through all this stuff, right? And as you get older, the things get easier. I don't know if it's perception, but things get easier because your experience you get more experienced and you care less as you get older.
Maybe it's not easier. Maybe you just get used to the beatings. Okay.
The scar tissue, all the nerve endings are numb. So you don't feel the beatings anymore.
Right. No, well, it does get easier. And I think, this is America, for God's sakes. This is the land of entrepreneurism and a place where people can still make your own future and your own fortune. And I really do believe that,
Yeah, I believe it too.
And so
I'm living proof. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So
you can do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. Jeffrey Burke, thank you for doing this. Hey, and let me just take a second to officially thank you for inviting me to join the board at Brooks Institute. That was a highlight of my career, and it will remain a highlight of my career to have been invited by someone like you and the other trustees to come on and join an institution that I had long respected, especially when I was Air Force photographer up at Vandenberg Air Force Base, looking down at Brooks Institute and sort of looking through the window, of like, one day if I'm cool enough, I could go to a school like this. To be able to sit on the board and kind of guide the direction of what things are happening, or what's happening at the school, was a dream. So I thank you officially for inviting me to that board.
Well, we feel like we bamboozled you into doing it, but it worked out well. And it was great to be on the board. It was great having you on the board. It was a pleasure and an honor to be associated with the Brooks Institute. It was, and I will always think that.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Jeffrey Burke, thanks for coming on This Week in Photo, and we'll see you next time.
Frederick Van, thank you very much for having me.
All right, man. Take care.